one of my incisions here because I had one really, it was at least one really big because they put, they pull it out. Like I know you were saying that they said there were lots, and they were saying they were out. Then they got to make bigger incisions. It's amazing that they still did outpatient surgery. They probably shouldn't have.
Well, yeah.
You got tall. Yeah.
The fiery furnace.
I was tickled to death when I saw you crossing the driveway.
Yeah. I got out Friday for the Weathersfield meeting, and that was my first time out. So I stayed a couple hours. I didn't stay much.
He got me out for 12 years.
I just wanted to thank you for your text last night. That was so sweet of you.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to make sure. That's what the thing is that when I asked them, like they have this text that goes out there, but I'm like, does that go to everybody? Like I don't know. So I'm like, I need to call the specific people that I know signed up because I want them to know for sure.
Well, Bev had texted me, and I had read the email, and so then I read the email, and then you texted me, so it was fantastic.
So did your son come shovel for you?
Not yet.
I don't know. Maybe Gordon's job. Sometimes our neighbor does it for us, and sometimes Philip does it, and sometimes Gordy does it, so.
I know, we tried to shovel for our neighbor, and they were out of town, like January, so we had to shovel because they weren't home. But then yesterday somebody had shoveled for them already, and it probably was another thing. Like, there's like a group of us that try to take care of them because
The people right next door they have married daughters that are living there, and so he persuades the husbands. I'm not sure exactly how that happens. We'll hear some activity out there and look out for one of them.
well, our house we have 4 weeks, like for all four of us go out and shovel, and it doesn't take that long when there's 4 of us to do it.
And then it goes at work, and then
The nomad returns to Illinois.
Well, I mean, we went on Saturday.
There, yeah.
And then Thursday, I taking care of Judith, but Ralph and Kathy and Donna met us all at Olive Garden, and I was going to invite you.
We shoveled it, we got more to see you.
But, but yeah, it was really nice. And Mom really enjoyed it. Okay. You need to, I'll get that. Can you stick the, so I don't have to spin your neck so far. Can you scoot it up even to that? Yeah, thanks. I'm just trying not to get my stiff neck.
No, just for me, you get here just later.
And this is just an idea of, how much. Zero's from this computer, the screen is from, well, whatever we're showing to the user. So if you know all the
Yes, yeah, I've gone it.
Good morning. How's the volume? All right. Getting ready to start. Wasn't the mountain beautiful this morning? it's like, what do you call that thing where you put confectioner's sugar on stuff, you know? It's like they put the snow and God went around here and said, okay, a little more snow here, and then you can really tell the contrast between where the trees are and where the rocks are. You can see it a lot better. Okay, we're continuing this quarter. This is the last month, lesson 11. Good morning to all of you who are here. I don't see any visitors, but good morning those here, and good morning to those on YouTube. Good morning to those on Zoom. Just looking on YouTube, seems like you have more views on YouTube when the audience is smaller here, because they're watching there. But the good thing about YouTube, you can watch it any time. Okay, so faith in the fiery furnace. We're doing faith that pleases God. This is, I said, lesson 11. We are in Daniel chapter 3. And next week we'll also be in Daniel. We'll be in chapter 6. So this will be, this is a familiar story. And if you grew up in the church, no doubt you had Bible stories on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, along with Daniel and the lion's den. So we're going to do Daniel chapter 3. Okay, the book of Daniel talks about Jewish life in a foreign land. Well, this is particularly not so much the foreign land, but a foreign city in Babylon. We talk these three people here, they were of the nobility, they lived in Babylon. To get more of an idea about the common folk, you might want to look at Ezekiel, because Ezekiel didn't get the treatment that these four did. He didn't get his name changed either. There was a series of 3 deportations from Judah. This is after the northern kingdom had already been deported into Assyria. And then Assyria then was taken over by Babylon, by Nebuchadnezzar and his father. And then they were in power for a while. And the first one was shortly after he took his office there, 605 BC. And this is the one where Daniel and the 3 youths were taken. And then 597, about 8 years later, Ezekiel and others were taken. And then finally in 586, Judah, the temple was destroyed, the walls, and then Nebuchadnezzar had had enough with the first 2. He had to go 900 miles, and he says, don't make me come again. So the third time he made sure that, they weren't going to rebel again. Among the deported here in Daniel were young men who were suitable for service to the Babylonian king. He pretty much took the best of the people there. And then the original text for this lesson is not in Hebrew, but in Aramaic. And that includes Daniel 2:4 through 7:28. And that includes Nebuchadnezzar's dream, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel and the lion's den. Now, I've read Daniel chapter 3 several times, never noticed anything. But Gordon, do you notice when you're reading a passage to teach it, you find a lot of stuff? Where did that come from? I mentioned before in Hebrew does repetition to show what's important, but the repetition in Daniel 3 goes above and beyond. I think we're told 5 times that Nebuchadnezzar built the image. I said, okay, we know that. Okay, the first deportation, 605 BC. We're going to go to Jeremiah. This is the first one. Then Daniel will repeat this, where Nebuchadnezzar took the king of Judah, together with officials. Now that would include the nobility there, craftsmen, metal workers, and he brought them to Babylon. So Jeremiah is pretty succinct here. The second deportation 8 years later, because they weren't behaving, Nebuchadnezzar put a leader in charge, and it was a relative of the current king, but they still rebelled against him. Jeremiah prophesied, this is God's will. Don't rebel. You're being, disciplined for your sins. But they tried to make, alliances with Egypt and try to get out of this. So 2 Kings now, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to the city while his servants were besieging it. And this was Okay, this one, the third one takes about a 3-year siege. They carried off the treasures of the house of the Lord and treasures of the king's house, and they cut it into pieces from the temple of the Lord, which Solomon the king of Israel had made. So these had been there for a while, as the Lord had foretold would happen in Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 5. And he carried away all Jerusalem and all the officials and all the mighty men of valor. So he took several on that first time, but this time he's going to really wipe them out. He took 10,000 the craftsmen, the blacksmiths, left everyone but the poorest people there. Okay, since he took all these people, you know, he's not going to get much taxation from these people, but he's got all the rich people with him. So only left the poorest, and they brought all these captive, including their military. So here's the map here. Here's Babylon right in here, and he comes down here. He had to do it 3 times, 900 miles, so you can imagine on the third time he wasn't happy. So here's Babylon right in here, and that's where Daniel, right in there. And then right in here is the Kavar River, and then this is where the second group of exiles were. This is where Ezekiel had his house. Now we talk about fiery furnace. Fiery is found in Scripture several times, and it's indicative of judgment and trials. First time we see it is in Numbers, where the people grumbled against Moses and God, so he sent fiery serpents among them, and they bit the people. And then in Psalms, this is the 7th plague on Egypt, where the Lord sent rain, hail, and fiery lightning bolts. This is the 7th plague. And then even in the New Testament, Jesus, this is the parable of the weeds. He talks about sinners and lawbreakers. They'll eventually be thrown into the fiery furnace. And in that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And then Peter also talks about fire. Do not be so this is talking about the trials that Christians go through. He says, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you. Testing, fiery trials. So let's get to Daniel. We're going to look at Daniel 1 first. 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim. This is about the year 605 BC. And the Lord gave the king of Judah into his hand. So it makes it clear here that Nebuchadnezzar did not take them. The Lord gave them, as he prophesied that he would. And he took some of the vessels of the house of God in this first one, which wasn't mentioned in Jeremiah. And they brought them to the land of Shinar, which is Babylon. Then the king commanded his chief eunuch Ashpenaz to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and the nobility, used without blemish, good appearance, skillful in all wisdom. So he's getting the cream of the crop of the youth and giving them 3 years worth of training. So he wants to keep them for a while, so that's why he's picking the youth here. Skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace. Now the understanding, learning, does it look like there should be a comma in there or something? We had Dr. Jerry here, you know, understanding, learning.
Yeah.
I looked at this in several different versions, and all of them were better than the ESV. I like the King James. Understanding science. Does that make sense? Understanding science. Competent to stand in the king's palace and to teach them the language, literature, and language of the Chaldeans.
Yeah.
That was not easy. Hebrew had a 26-letter alphabet. The Chaldeans had symbols. That would be like the difference between us learning Spanish versus Chinese. Now the language, like I said, the Hebrew had 22 letters. Here's some of the Akkadian cuneiform. There were thousands of them. Can you imagine learning that? That's why he picked the best and the brightest, and it took 3 years. The king assigned them a daily portion of food that the king ate and wine that he drank. And of course we know Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel didn't want to eat this. They called it, "We will not defile ourselves." The vast majority of the population would have loved to eat the same food as the king, but they didn't want to do that. So they were educated 3 years, probably took them 3 years to learn that cuneiform, and at the end of the time they were to stand before the king. Among these, so there were more than these 3. They took a lot of them, but these 3 stood out, or these 4. Among these 4 were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, of the tribe of Judah. These were all Judeans, and it is in Babylon that the Israelites were called Jews. Jew is short for Judean. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names, changed their names. That indicates you have authority over them. You know, we know God changed the name of Abraham, Sarah, and then Jesus gave Simon a different name. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them Daniel, he called Belteshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. This chief of the eunuch. You're familiar with the apostolic fathers, the early church fathers? There's one called Jerome. Jerome said that Daniel 1:7 was the fulfillment of Isaiah 39:7. And this is Isaiah speaking to Hezekiah. "And some of your own sons who will come from you, whom you will father, shall be taken away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon." Now this sons doesn't literally mean sons. Sometimes it can mean descendants. Sometimes fathers can mean ancestors. So his descendants are going to be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Now we're not told specifically that these were, but who else is in the palace of Babylon that's descended from royalty? And these 4 youths, God gave them learning, skill, literature. Daniel had understanding. So Daniel was above all of them. And after the 3 years of training, they didn't automatically get to stand before the king. The king interviewed them. The king spoke with them, and among them was found none like these 4. So they were above all the other Jews that were deported. And they were selected to stand before the king.
So, are you saying that these young men were made eunuchs in the king's palace?
No, I'm not saying that. No, nobody would say that, but it seems that, well, if they weren't, who was?
Yes. It seems that from the Chaldeans' perspective, them coming from Judea, those individuals being Jews, they are wiping out their whole history by forcing them to learn the cuneiform, the language, the history, the culture. Also, it went as far as possibly thinking, turning them into eunuchs and renaming them with a Chaldean or Babylonian name.
Now, we know this didn't happen with Ezekiel, because when he came, he was married. He had a wife. So let's see. He found these 4 10 times smarter than his own wise men. So here are the names, Hebrew names, there on the left, and then the new names are Akkadian. We have Daniel, Hananiah, of course, there. And then there's the meaning of the name. My judge is God, gift of the Lord, who is what God is, and help from the Lord. And then on the right are the new names. And we notice that Daniel, we typically know him as Daniel, but the other 3, we know them by their Akkadian names. Mm-hmm. Seems a little strange. And why would he have changed their names? Look at the meaning of their names. they're associated with the Hebrew God. He changes their names so they're associated with the Babylonian gods. We got Bel and Nebo, and they're mentioned here in Isaiah 46. Essentially, this is a passage on the judgment of Babylon, and the Lord is saying here that the gods of Babylon, they're going to be hauled away on ox carts. The people can't help the gods, and the gods can't help the people. So God also has several names in Daniel. God, Elohim, that's just a designation. That's a deity. Lord, that's like a sovereign, a master. And then God's name, Yahweh, the name. And that's found only 9 times, and it's only mentioned in chapter 9 where Daniel is praying to him. Only Daniel mentions God's name. And then we have Most High and Most High God. And typically, this is how Nebuchadnezzar addresses him. And then we have Ancient of Days in chapter 7. And then these last 3 are only found in the Aramaic portions of Daniel. So we're going to look at about 5, break it up into 5 different sections on things that we can learn from these passages. Daniel 3, 1 through 7. God's people. We, today, will be confronted with idols in this world. Not necessarily a 90-foot statue, but we have our own idols, things that keep us from worshiping God the way we should. So the golden image, when Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits and its breadth 6 cubits, he set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Remember chapter 2, the dream Nebuchadnezzar had? The statue with the 4 different metals, and he's the head, and the head was gold. So apparently this dream went to his head, and he said, I'm going to build that. Except the whole thing is going to be me. I'm going to make an entire thing of gold. The dimensions here are kind of unusual. 10 times higher than it is. It'd be shaped like a pencil, like a rocket. Now, Daniel 3:1 in the Septuagint gives us a little more information about the timing. It says this happened in the 18th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, when he was governing cities and countries and even all the inhabitants of the earth from India to Ethiopia. He constructed the golden image and the dimensions, and he set it up on the plain that encircles the region of Babylon. So this gives us some additional information. The timing, 18th year, this puts this statue about the same time that Jerusalem is being sacked, 586, 587 BC. Gives us the size of his empire. In 18 years, he's expanded the Babylonian Empire to go from India to Ethiopia. And then it also lets us know that they really don't know where this statue was set up. They said on the plain of Dura, and what I've said, nobody knows where it is. And then from the Septuagint, this is only 300 years later, they still don't know where it is. The plain that encircles the region of Babylon. And this Ethiopia and India is also confirmed in the ESV. This is from Esther. Ahasuerus was the king who was married to Esther, and he reigned from India to Ethiopia. So apparently, when they went from the Babylonians to the Persians, they didn't increase the size of the empire that much. So there's a drawing of the statue there. Then the king sent to gather. So here's some of the repetitions going to start here. The satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justice, the magistrates, and all the officials. So we're going to abbreviate those to the officials. So it's believed that these goes from highest to lowest. And Daniel was one of the prefects, so the second level. He was the chief prefects. And they came to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. We'll see that several times. Then the officials of the province gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. There that is again. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. See the repetition? I think if you turn this into your composition, to English composition, you get your paper back with a lot of red ink. So maybe he was getting paid by the word. And the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages." That's about the same thing. That when you hear the sound of, here's another, the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe. Wonder if he's wearing a kilt. Probably.
Yeah.
The bagpipe and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. But here they changed the had to a has for some reason. But the word music, what's the Greek for music?
Symphony.
Symphony. When you hear, so I'm thinking, you didn't have a guy with a horn. They weren't all playing just randomly. This was a symphony. They were, then maybe they had a conductor or something. So you're to fall down. So we're going to call that the symphony. So we got the officials and the symphony.
So it wasn't a cacophony.
No. No. And how many of them had? So apparently this statue was around Babylon, and that was just one of the provinces. So I think this is primarily the people of Babylon that have to, or that can hear this symphony.
One would wonder if all of these officials had little tiny golden miniatures in their homes provided by Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah. And what if you don't hear it? What if you're doing something or something? Did they have a set time? Or could Nebuchadnezzar say, "Oh, you guys play"? The Jews had the hour of prayer, the hour of sacrifice. They knew when it happened, but was there a set time when they did this? And whoever does not fall down and worship, so there's a punishment. So apparently there's the idea that not everyone's going to do this. So he gives them some motivation, negative motivation. If you don't do it, does not fall down, and worship shall immediately be cast. Immediately. It makes us think like we're reading Mark. Immediately, not the next day. He shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. We get that word burning a lot. Therefore, as soon as all the peoples hear the symphony, they shall fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. I think we have that 4 or 5 times. So, 2, this is Daniel 3, 8 through 12. God's people will be criticized by the people of this world. Well, we know that, don't we? If you don't go along with the ways of the world, well, you think you're better than I am. If you don't follow us, then you're strange. So this is Daniel 3, verses 8 through 12. The fiery furnace. At that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. I've heard it said when you see a therefore in Scripture, you need to examine what it's there for. And I couldn't find any reason why it's there for. Looked at it in the Aramaic, and the word that's there for is 3 prepositions followed by a pronoun, which didn't really make sense. And looking at a language commentary, they did say, this doesn't make sense for English. Suggest you avoid this word. And the only one that did it was the NIV. They just start there. So at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. Do they have an agenda? And not all of them, just they got 3 of them. They declared to king, "O king, live forever," just a standard greeting. "You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the symphony shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. You know, it wouldn't be much of a threat if just cast into a furnace that's not glowing, right? So what does that do for Jews? What if you don't have much faith? I'm not going to do that. You got to really have faith to do that. And there are certain Jews, I think they have some in mind, certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon. Does it sound like they're going after him? These people that you appointed aren't doing a good job. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, three charges against them. One, they pay no attention to you. These are men you had appointed over the affairs of Babylon. You appointed them over us, and they don't pay any attention to you. Two, they don't serve your gods. Well, he already knew that from back in the time with the dream. He knew that they served a different God. And they won't worship your golden image that you have set up. 3, Daniel 3:13 through 15. God's people will be challenged to worship the gods of this world. You know, the gods of this world. Money, power, popularity. Their God was a gold statue, which probably took about 15 years to make.
It would be remiss to think that even though they've been taken away, they have been renamed, re-educated, that these Jews, these people could not forget, thou shalt have no other gods before me. They couldn't get that out of the people. It was in their hearts and in their heads.
Yeah.
Obviously they were worshiping God, but not the golden image.
Yep. You know the story of Naaman the leper? He was from Syria. He had leprosy, couldn't be cured. There was a young girl, Israelite girl, who had been taken captive, and she said there's someone in her land that could cure him. So the king, he gets permission from the king to go back to see, and he meets with Elijah. He's got plenty of stuff to reward him if he does that. And he says, what should I do? And he says, you need to dip 7 times in the river Jordan. And Jordan is not a pristine river. He says, I got a couple of rivers back home, Rocky Mountain spring water. Can I dip myself in them? And he goes away. His servant says, what does it hurt? So he dips himself 7 times, and his skin is as clean as a baby's. He goes back home. We think, the end. Well, that's not the end. He asks a favor. First of all, Elijah turns down the gifts. He says, can I take 2 oxen's worth of soil back home? Because I want to worship your God. I want to worship your God. And the thought was, the God, if you want to worship this God, you have to have some of his soil, because he's the God of the land. So I want to worship you. However, I got a problem. As part of my position, I have to accompany the king when he goes to worship his God. And when I do that, I'm going to have to bow down to this idol. And I pray the Lord will forgive me for doing this, because I'm only doing it because I have to. You know, these people worship me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. So how many of these people that bowed down to this idol were just doing it to do it? Their heart wasn't actually in it. So did the Lord forgive them? You know, just to save their lives. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in a furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought, so they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up?" So first he wants to get it from him. Are these charges true that they have made? Now, if you are ready when you hear the sound of the symphony and fall down and worship, then everything is well and good. Well, forget about this, and you can go on and being head of the affairs of the province of Babylon. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning, fiery furnace. Now this goes back to, remember Hebrews 11? We talked about, sod. Some were tortured. Can you imagine a fiery furnace? Refusing to accept release. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were offered release. Okay, you hadn't done this in the past, but if you do it now and continue to do it, things will go well. Now it's also told with regard to Isaiah, before they sought him in two, they offered him release. They said, if you disavow what you've said, and if you support Manasseh, then well and good, we won't saw you in two. But he didn't do it. He got sawed in two. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? Apparently in 15 years he'd lost his memory or something.
Yes.
He knew who the God was. It was the same God that interpreted his dream through Daniel. And then here it is in Daniel 2:46, about 15 years earlier, 15 to 16 years. The king answered and said to Daniel, "Truly your God is God of gods and Lord of lords and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery." Now, were these words, or was he speaking truthfully? Your God is God of gods. What does that mean?
He's top God.
He's the God of Bel and Nebo, and your God is God of my gods. Your God is Lord of kings. Your God is Lord of me. Right? That's what he's saying. So with that confession, what are you doing? Remind you a little bit of King Agrippa? Almost do you think you can persuade me to worship your God, even though your God is clearly better than my God? Okay. God's people must be courageous in the face of danger. They know that, they're not going to turn around and this fiery furnace, there's probably several. It's not the fiery furnace, it's a fiery furnace. You can imagine those things belching out black smoke, the noxious air, and you're going to be thrown into that thing. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you on this matter." Now this sounds, that same language commentary said, this sounds a little worse than it is, It means something like, well, everything you've said is true, We plead no contest. It's true. If this be of our God whom we serve is able, if this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you. But if not, there are many prophets that God didn't deliver. Remember last week we read about Manasseh, where he filled the streets of Jerusalem with the blood of the prophets. They weren't delivered. Isaiah wasn't delivered. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. So I imagine, how do you think he felt now? The king. You have just defied me. We will not serve the gods or worship that golden image that you have set up. We will not bow down to that golden image. Paul says an idol is nothing, but still the example, these three men are in leadership positions. Just think of the example that they would be setting. Now, reasons why not. Gordon touched on that. Reason one, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. You shall have no other gods before me. Reason two, you shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water of the earth. So, no other gods before me. Don't make any graven image. Reason three, you shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children of the third and fourth generation. So by doing that, they're violating 30% of the Ten Commandments just by bowing down there. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew this. And we're not told, but you wonder how many of those 10,000 people refused to fall down here. We're not told, what did Ezekiel do? Maybe Ezekiel was outside that province. What about Daniel? Why wasn't he brought up? Keep in mind, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were over the affairs of the province. They were out in the province. Now, if we look here, this is Daniel 2:48 and 49. This is after Daniel interpreted the dream. He made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained in the king's court. So he didn't go out. He stayed in. So they wouldn't have known. Okay, 5. God's people can be confident that the Lord is with them no matter what happens in this world. So they refused. Earlier they had refused to eat the king's food. And now they're refusing to worship the king's image there. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and expression on his face changed against the three. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than was usually heated. He was really mad. Now the 7 is an indication of fullness. So just heat it as high as you can. You know, this furnace didn't have a temperature gauge on it. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind them and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. From what I read, the shape of this furnace was sort of like an old-fashioned milk bottle with the top there, the smokestack. You put that in. And you could possibly get the furnace up to about 1900 degrees. 1943 degrees is the melting point of gold, so possibly that high. I think if you 7 times, you couldn't even do that with wood or charcoal as a fuel. So he's saying get it as hot as you can. So there's the, there they are, in the fire. Death by fire. It is mentioned here in Jeremiah. Hear the word of the Lord about the exiles. There were 2 men there. Let's see, Ahab and Zedekiah, false prophets, speaking not what God had commanded. And he says, I'm going to deliver them over to the hand of Nebuchadnezzar for punishment. I'm not going to punish them. Nebuchadnezzar can punish them. So because of this, because of them, this curse shall be used by all the exiles of Judah in Babylon. The Lord make you like Zedekiah and Ahab, whom the king of Babylon roasted in the fire. So God did not send his angel to protect these 2. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace was overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these men fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. Now, did they die before they went in, or did they voluntarily jump in? So they're in there. Then the king, let's see, did I get that one? Yeah, bound. Then the king was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared, did not we cast 3 men into? They answered and said, true, O king. And he answered and said, but I see 4 men unbound walking in the midst of the fire. They're not hurt. And the appearance of them, of the 4th, is like a son of the gods. So how did he know what a son of the gods looked like? Or why wouldn't he say, isn't a son of the gods a god? Now we know, like angels, their appearance, their clothing glowed. But I would imagine all their clothing glowed here, wouldn't you? In this fire. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door. So why didn't he die? You know, the man that brought him close died, but he came near. Apparently he was able to. Servants of the Most High God. Why is he calling them that when he asked, whose God are you? And all of a sudden now he knows. Back
Gets his memory back.
Yeah, he's got it. Oh, yeah, you're servants of the Most. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the officials there gathered together and saw that the fire had not any power over their bodies or over their clothes. Their clothes weren't singed. They didn't get the smell of the soot on them or anything like that. You know, they came out daisy fresh. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach. So he's blessing God. Blessed be the God. So that's something usually Melchizedek would do. Who has sent his angel, here he calls him an angel, and delivered his servants who trusted him, and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies, rather than serve and worship any god except their own. Therefore I make a decree. Now we know in Persia, what happens when the king made a decree?
It could not be revoked.
You can't change it. You can't change that. That's not true today, is it? First thing a new president does right after inauguration is sign all the paperwork getting rid of the stuff from the previous administration. That's if it's a different party. Any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn from limb to limb. So hopefully whoever these people were that accused them will learn a lesson from this. And their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. No other God. So he's speaking all these kind words. What is Nebuchadnezzar doing? He's not changing, is he? Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. We're not told how he promoted. They were over the affairs of the province of Babylon. Maybe made them a prefect or a governor or something like that, but they got promoted. Faith in times of trouble. I think we have a little, that'll be next week. That's Daniel in the lion's den. These are some of the statements that Nebuchadnezzar made about God. Truly your God is God of gods, Lord of lords, King of kings, and solver of mysteries. Therefore I make a decree, any God who speaks evil, anyone who speaks evil against them, and then to all the peoples, nations, and languages to dwell in. Peace be multiplied to you. It has seemed good to me to show the signs and wonders that the Most High God has done for me. So with all those glowing things, you would think, well, we're going to change the religion here. We're going to be, but nope, doesn't happen. All right, so next week is Daniel chapter 6. And even though it's in Aramaic, it doesn't have all the repetitions like this one had. So Daniel and the den of lions, not a den of, the den of lions. And we'll get into Why did they have a den of lions? Was it the Babylonian Zoo? All right, that's it.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren.
All right.